discuss. I'll have introduction, look at the nexus between migration and terrorism, unfolding floodgates of migration, COVID-19 and migration, and I'll run my conclusions. Two major events of recent memory have jolted the world, and both seem to have caught the world unprepared. These are the terrorist attacks of 9/11 in the United States and the novel coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19. Depending on the worldview of the researcher, various studies have taken different positions on the nexus between Islam, terrorism, and the securitization of migration laws. Existing literature supports the relationship between transnational terrorism and restrictiveness of immigration policies. In Europe particularly, a dubious connection has been established linking, even if only implicitly at times, migration and terrorism. The nexus between migration and terrorism evokes frequently hostile and approach to migration at the level of society and government, resulting in acts of xenophobia, border closures, and even construction of walls, etc. Religious motivated terrorist attacks are currently engulfing Nigeria, the most populous country in Africa. Nigeria is ranked the 3rd in the 2020 Global Terror Index. Boko Haram, an Islamic terrorist group whose name translates to Western education is evil, has been running a campaign of kidnappings and mass destruction of anything they consider un-Islamic. 276 Christian female students were kidnapped on April 14, 2014. Some of the girls have been used as suicide bombers. Some have been married to members of terror groups. Some have been tortured to death for refusal to convert to Islam or used as sex slaves. In 2016, internal tensions led to multiple Boko Haram splinter groups forming. The largest splinter group, Islamic State for West African Province, ISWAP, has claimed responsibility for a number of brutal attacks targeting civilians and military personnel. In addition, Fulani herdsmen have also emerged as a major terror group in the country. On July 29, 2021, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations warned that the world is not ready for 240 million migrants if Nigeria should explode. The country has been teetering on the precipice as a result of the activities of these Islamic terrorist groups. 2 decades after the toppling of Taliban, Islamic State, the Islamic terror regime, the United States has been scrambling to leave Afghanistan. It lost thousands of US lives and more than $1 trillion. These heavy investments failed to bring lasting democracy to that country. As of February 2021, the Afghan forces numbered 308,000 personnel, according to the United Nations Security Council reports released in June this year, well above the estimated number of armed Taliban fighters, which range from 58,000 to 100,000. The Taliban ostensibly were able to overrun the country because, according to Taliban spokesman Shaheen, we have roots among the people Apparently, some of the military were officers by day and Taliban by night. The chaos and panic witnessed in Kabul International Airport, where Afghans desperate to get out of the country, clung to a US Air Force plane and eventually fell to their deaths is another manifestation of the impending catastrophic migration challenges the world has to deal with. The January 2007 US President Donald Trump's executive order 13769 entitled Protecting the Nation from Foreign Terrorist Entry into the United States, which became known as the Muslim Travel Ban. The executive order aimed at restricting the number of migrants from certain Islamic countries into the United States, ranging from travel bans to elimination of visa waiver programs and stricter screening for refugees and potential migrants. With over 226 million cases and almost 4.7 million deaths globally, COVID-19 pandemic, which swept the globe in a few months, will reshape society in a very profound way. The COVID-19 pandemic is more than a health crisis. It is an economic crisis, a humanitarian crisis, a security crisis, as well as a human rights crisis. This pandemic has heightened severe fragilities and inequalities within and among nations. Some countries and regions have been impacted more severely than others. With its many mutations and variants, prompt medical and social interventions are the only hope to decelerate the ravaging virus. Among its numerous repercussions, COVID-19 has greatly affected international migration. The pandemic has disrupted all forms of human mobility through border closures of national borders and the halting of travel worldwide. Preliminary estimates by the United Nations suggest that the pandemic may have slowed the growth in the stock of international migration by around 2 million by mid-2020, 27% less than the growth expected since mid-2019. Before the pandemic, growth in the number of international migrants had been robust over the last 2 decades, reaching 281 million people living outside their country of origin in 2020, up from 173 million in 2000 and 221 million in 2010. Currently, international migrants represent about 3.6% of the world's population. 2/3 of all international migrants live in just 20 countries. The United States of America remains the largest destination, hosting 51 million international migrants in 2020, which equals 18% of the world's total of migrants. And these few graphs depict the magnitude of migrant stock globally from 1960 to 2050. International migrants in top 10 sending countries. This graph shows the countries that have sent most migrants to the rest of the world. And on top of that list is India, followed by Mexico, China, Russia, Syria, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Ukraine, Philippines, and Afghanistan. This figure, of course, is likely to go up for Pakistan, Afghanistan in particular, because given what has just happened this year, 2021, we expect to have a lot more migrants coming out of Afghanistan. International migrants in top 10 receiving countries in 2019. The United States remained the largest recipient of migrants, like I said earlier, more than 51 million, followed by Germany. Of course, Angela Merkel had allowed in the number of refugees from Syria during the conflict in that country, and this significantly increased the number of migrants from Syria to Germany. The third country that hosts a number of migrants is Saudi Arabia, followed by Russia, United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, France, Canada, Australia, and Italy. In quick conclusion, international migrants in the late 20th century moved from poor to rich countries in order to raise earnings. That was the trend at the time. But in the 21st century, international migrants are motivated by the need to escape threats to well-being from a variety of sources, including state disintegration, civil violence, domestic violence, effect of climate change, political upheaval, and economic collapse, and so on. Religious terrorism, even though it appears to be contained in recent times, because of the high fatality that they cause, have continued to elicit fear among the general population globally. A number of analysts have found that immigration policies became more restrictive in response to September 11 attacks in the United States of America. Migration may nevertheless lead to terrorism under unfavorable circumstances, especially when state capacity and socioeconomic conditions in host countries are poor and detrimental to migrants and especially refugee integration. And this is an example where we have had refugees in Italy setting the camps where they were hosted on fire, and such other violence did take place because even the migrants and refugees felt unsatisfied because of the condition that they made at the time. According to the World Bank projections, the COVID-19 pandemic may reduce the volume of remittance sent to low and middle income countries from US $548 billion in 2019 to US $470 billion in 2021, which represents a decline of 78 billion or 14%. The loss has affected livelihood of millions of migrants and their families. Evidence indicates that migration per se is not a Trojan horse of terrorism. As this crisis rages on, we must be reminded of the importance of addressing human mobility in a safe and inclusive way for the benefit of our countries and economies, as well as those of the migrants. Thank you.